Welcome to the Top Order podcast. In a break from our usual programming this week in cricket and covering the goings-on in the on-field activity around the cricketing world, we're going to go back to a format that we pioneered, I think, in many ways, the Mount Rushmore of cricketers. What we're going to be talking about today, though, is the Mount Rushmore of the 4 most influential cricketers of the 21st century. We'll explain a little bit more, all coming up on the Top Order podcast. Stay tuned. So, Michael is the person that comes up with the majority of the harebrained ideas on the podcast.
Thanks very much.
And look, I mean that in the nicest possible way. You are the content king, really, of the Top Order podcast. We've done a bunch of different algorithms. We've had our top 100 players. We've had a number of Mount Rushmore conversations. We've got a pretty different one tonight. Your preparation is normally impeccable. You haven't brought your microphone with you, which is why viewers might see you and I sharing like the Everly brothers. But do you want to explain the concept behind the 21st century's 4 most influential cricketers?
This episode's going to run super smoothly with this microphone transition between the two of us. First of all, happy anniversary, chaps. 5-year anniversary of the Top Order podcast. So we've gone past 4 and got to 5 now. So we're eligible to go to primary school here in New Zealand. So well done. I thought we'd have a bit of fun this week on this episode. And what we're looking to explore as a topic are the 4 most influential cricketers of the 21st century. So we're looking for most influential here, not the best. So while we want viewers and listeners to give us some feedback on their thoughts on the most influential, we're looking for influence and impact, not best cricketer. So before you write in and tell us that Sachin is the best cricketer or the most influential of the 21st century, he might be, but not necessarily because he scored lots of runs and has got a great average. So we're looking for influence and impact.
And on that, when
best.
It's impact from that starting point is 2000. So if they played, it's only their impact afterwards. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
That is the 21st
century. Yes. Yeah. So whether or not you believe that the 21st century starts in 2000 or 2001 will count for the purposes of this podcast 1 January 2000 onwards.
Yeah.
Right? We're happy with that? Cool. So what we're after is some nominations. Why you think, or what do you think their influence was? Why is it so impactful for the game of cricket as we know it in this century? And is it a good thing for cricket or not? So we could have someone who had a tremendous impact on cricket but wasn't necessarily positive. So why don't we open it to Stuart first, and we'll do a snaking order. Is that the plan, Binksy?
You tell me, because
Fine.
you understand the concept
Of a snake?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you get 2 goes.
Everyone gets 2 goes. I just have my 2 in a row. Okay?
Good. All
Right. Strong.
And is there a time box on this?
Yeah, let's put about 5 or 6 minutes on the clock. You can play timekeeper again, Adam, because you're good at that. So let's put about 6 minutes.
Brothers or Gallagher brothers?
It's more
Not got the hair.
more Gallagher than Everly at the moment. But it's a good dynamic between the two of us, I'm sure. Right, Stuart, you're on the clock.
You want me to start? Okay.
I do.
So I think probably the first thing that people will get maybe not confused about, but have their own opinions on, and I think possibly where we will differ, I think, is the definition of influential.
This is in your time as well, by the way.
That's fine. That's fine. Look, because I think for me, I've been trying to sort of judge what that is, and I think for I have sort of given a few thoughts about actually being good, I think, and contributing to winning or contributing to producing a team environment, I think is probably something I may like hold up higher than you guys compared to, just from our very brief chats before, compared to necessarily how they've changed the actual play of cricket in terms of things. So I think the first person that I will throw out there is Virat Kohli. And, obviously I think we all know about his statistics and his ability and all of that kind of stuff, and I'm not going to focus too much on that. I want to start by saying the guy has 271 million followers on Instagram. So if you want to talk about someone who is influential, according to Wikipedia, that is the 16th highest active account of all Instagram accounts.
And presumably there isn't a cricketer ahead of that.
There are no cricketers ahead of that. There are 2 sports people.
What's Don Bradman?
Yeah, Bradman. I don't think Bradman has an Instagram account, but well, he probably does. There's someone. I'm sure there's someone out. A friend of mine made a Don Bradman Facebook account, so I'm sure that there is a
friend of his.
Yeah, a friend of mine. So, but Cristiano Ronaldo and Leo Messi are the other two sports people on there. But Kohli is on there. I think he's just behind Bieber and Taylor Swift. So, if we're talking about influential people.
Good cover drive, Taylor Swift.
Yeah, she bowled a good left arm leggy, didn't she? In one of her photos that I saw. But I think if we, so on that, completely influential as a person, I think you could say. On the cricket front, I think I know that we're going to talk about MS Dhoni, I'm sure, as we go. But when I think about this decade or this 20 years of cricket for since the 21st century, India is the dominant side that I think of. There's Australia and there's India. And when we talk about India, I think Dhoni kind of set them on the path. He's the one that sort of started them off winning games, winning trophies and ICC trophies. I think Kohli has taken that, picked up that baton and taken them even further by his drive and all of the passion that he's gone, and taken them to a point now where India is the dominant side, and I think so set up to be the dominant side for a long, long time. So that's, I've got lots of other things in here, but, I don't need to talk for 10 minutes about Virat. So that's my opening argument.
So just to build on what you said there about the dominant era and, perhaps the foundations being set earlier by the likes of Dhoni and stuff like that, who we might come on to a bit later, you're 100% right that Kohli, along with Shastri and a few of the others, were the execution part of the era. It was set in motion, and then they decided that, we need to be the best team in the world. We need to win outside of India. It's not good enough just to bowl teams out for 60 in India and then get spanked when you go abroad. They executed, and the sort of the flagship tour is that one they won in Australia. That's what I would go with. That's very influential, definitely on the game of Test cricket. And his big numbers are all in the white ball game, right? He's got all the records of scoring the 1,000 the 1,000 milestones, the fastest out of everybody, I believe, all the way through to maybe 10 or 11,000. He's been very influential for me.
Who's on your list? Because we're doing the snake draft, aren't we? So you're gonna come up with your
okay. You didn't want to talk more about Virat Kohli?
We'll come back to Kohli, I'm sure.
We'll come back and talk about the influence, because we're going to throw some names in the pot, and then we might come back and revisit some of these themes. I think is the theory, isn't it, Baldy?
Sure, why not?
Okay, I'll move away from India. I'll go to Chris Gayle. So the reason that I've chosen Chris Gayle to be one of the most influential cricketers is that the impact that T20 cricket has had, and he has had on T20 cricket. We may not even, we're starting to feel the impact of things like the contract situations that boards are going to be going through. Chris Gayle, is he the original mercenary? He may be the original mercenary. He's definitely the universe boss. But he's the first player to score 10,000 runs in T20 cricket, which has now become the most sort of watched format of our game. His consistent moving around 2020 leads is why I've got him there as that sort of most influential person, and I think his influence is only going to grow. He set up 2020 cricket as that festival of cricket. He was entertaining on and off the field, sometimes probably a little bit too charismatic off the field with some of his comments and things that he said, but you knew what you were getting with Chris Gayle. He put bums on seats, he put eyeballs on TV sets, which is exactly what 2020 cricket needed at that time of its life cycle, its journey.
Yeah, can I just pick up on that, because I had Chris Gayle on my list as well, and if Raj didn't go with him in his first round pick, he would have been the first player that I had at pick number 4. For me, the impact is not just the cricketing ability, but he made it mainstream acceptable for players to become franchise first cricketers, and made that a thing, a career that cricketers could go and pursue, and there was no stigma attached to it at that point. And at the very formation of big franchise tournaments, in order for those to be any kind of financial success, they needed to have a super duper star, a charismatic figure, someone like Chris Gayle, to be the headline act for those tournaments. And he was absolutely the right player, the right type of person at the right time to be that headline act for those big T20 tournaments around the world. I don't think anyone could have done it as well as Chris Gayle did. Many would get very, very close from an ability perspective. Sure, there might be better cricketers, but he was the perfect kind of culmination of right guy, right time for the beginning of T20 cricket.
Do we want to, I mean, before, like, I know we don't want to go too deep into the weeds, but, on that same lines, I had Pollard down as that player. I know that you guys...
We'll come back to Pollard.
We'll come back to Pollard?
Okay. We'll stick with the format. Otherwise, we will be here until Christmas. Okay. You've talked about, obviously, Chris Gayle. You've introduced Pollard. There'd be others that follow. So I'm going to go from speed or meth to lithium. I'm going to slow things down slightly.
You're the one telling the story.
Yeah, look, and I think in terms of influence, I think when I saw this in the Slack channel, I think I've probably maybe interpreted it slightly differently to you guys. But I've gone with one that I'm sure this is, let's timestamp this at 13 minutes in already. This is where the comments are going to start. I'm going to go with Andrew Strauss. And my rationale for Andrew Strauss as an influential cricketer of the 21st century is he burst onto the scene really the kind of end of the sort of Duncan Fletcher and Nasser Hussain period where they'd introduced central contracts into English cricket, which was a massive thing. We might mention it a little bit later on, but, we talk of Graham Thorpe, who, unfortunately has very sadly passed away this week. He mentioned he felt that he got loaned out to play for England rather than, playing for his county and England was his team. And that's the way that works now. Strauss kind of picked up that baton from Nasser Hussain and became captain. Ashes 05 was obviously a turning point in English cricket. Prior to that, we'd beaten the West Indies away, which at that stage wasn't, always the done thing. He got more runs in that Ashes series than every Australian, with the exception of Justin Langer, although he was only fourth on the runs chart for the England team. He then went away in 09 for the Ashes, or home 09, I should say, and won it again. And then was the captain that actually got the urn down in Australia in 10-11. And whilst he didn't quite hang on from a playing perspective after that, his side was the side that really went to India in 2012 and went and won away in India. And that was post the Kevin Pietersen gate and all the text messages and all that kind of stuff. Where I think I've interpreted this a little bit differently maybe is post playing, he very quickly moved into what is now the Rob Key role. Was instrumental in resetting that England white ball side in 2015. He dropped Broad and Anderson after that 2015 World Cup. He put his stock into two real key things: Trevor Bayliss, Owen Morgan as captain, and really set that run up for that England one-day outfit to win the 2019 World Cup and the 2022 World Cup, if you want to stretch. And then even now, he was instrumental in the high performance review, which in part has paved the way for the hiring of Brendon McCullum and Rob Key in their roles as well. So I think you have a playing career that probably started slightly before that 2000 period that Baldy mentioned, but has really still got an influence in 2024, particularly in English cricket, which I'm obviously reasonably passionate about.
It's not a name I'd even considered. So I'm glad you brought him to the table.
Nice. Bringing different names to the table is what this is all about. So I get two picks here. So I'm going to go.
You already had one. That's Chris Gayle.
Oh, so I'm not allowed. Okay, so damn it. Okay, so I'm going to take your point, Stu, and alter it slightly. I'm on the same vein as you in terms of cricketing influence in India. But when I thought about the most influential cricketer that I could think of in Indian cricket in this century, it's MS Dhoni. And the reason I went with Dhoni rather than Virat is that it's not easy to pick up the mantle and take it forward, but it is very, very difficult to pick up a stationary object and get that flywheel going. And I feel like the dominance of Indian cricket over the last 24, 25 years, particularly in white ball cricket, was instigated by and influenced heavily by MS Dhoni's leadership and his ability to construct a way of playing cricket for India that not only maximised his skill, but made India a winning team. India have always been traditionally a very powerful cricket side full of very, very talented individuals, but they weren't always particularly fit. They weren't great fielding sides. They didn't always maximise the little things that turned good cricketers into great cricketers and good teams into winning teams. So for me, Dhoni's influence, as much as being a great man manager and leader of people, both internationally and in the IPL, his influence on Indian cricket has been one where he transformed them from a team that didn't quite believe that they were good enough to win major tournaments, either in the IPL. I mean, we have a look at his IPL success. How many times has he won with Chennai? 4 or 5 times now, as well as being able to lead India to 2 World Cup victories or be instrumental in 2 World Cup victories for a nation now that expects to win every time they go. So that's the only reason that I separated hairs in terms of Virat's influence versus Dhoni's influence. I gave a slightly more weighting to the man who went and did it first rather than the guy who picked up the mantle and has taken it even further.
And you have you have Dhoni as well?
I do have Dhoni. It's all the points that Baldy just mentioned. India traditionally, before the MS Dhoni era, was a team of massive individuals, massive. I'm going to use the word egos. They were great cricketers, not necessarily all great leaders, not necessarily great team players. They went out and played well for themselves. But he changed that completely, and he was able to sculpt not only those players that were playing at the time, but the likes of Virat Kohli, Rohit Sharma, Ravindra Jadeja, all those guys coming through into the sort of cricketers they are. And, it's not only about going out and scoring 100. Maybe scoring a patient 80 is better for the team. You know what I mean? So, yeah, that's what I had with Dhoni. And, of course, he was a commercial success. Not as much as Virat Kohli. He doesn't have a great Instagram account.
So 49.6 million.
That's plenty.
That's enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's better than ours. So do like and subscribe. So yeah, look, I think we've obviously done a little bit of prep for this, and we've talked about who we've got on our list. I think we are going to probably focus quite heavily on, look, in all honesty, the big 3 cricketing nations, because I think that they have a lot of impact for the global game. We will talk. I think we've got at least a Sri Lankan on the list, a couple of West Indians, I think, and a Kiwi as well, of course. But I'm going to go, and again, this is not because I'm English. This is the way I've prepped. I have got 2 picks. I think you guys have got sort of 5 or 6. I've gone with 2 in a sort of list of honourable mentions, if you like. But I've got Kevin Pietersen as one of my picks, and that's polarising for many reasons. It's the second South African-born English cricket player that I've got after Andrew Strauss, who was, I think, also born in Johannesburg. The reason I've got KP, I think, talks a little bit to some of the influence that he had on others, like Dhoni, but in a very different way, I think. Burst onto the scene against the nation of his birth, and showed some, I think bollocks is the right word, in going out to South Africa and scoring a couple of hundreds in a one-day series whilst everyone was booing him, and even turned around public opinion on him in his own country. Look, he then kind of entered, and I'm skipping a few chapters, but entered, cricketing folklore from an English perspective with his performance in those 2005 Ashes, that 158 at the Oval. There isn't an English cricket fan that will ever forget that innings. And I'll borrow from Baldy when we were talking earlier on about James Anderson on a previous podcast, where you said he didn't invent wobble seam, but he probably, pioneered in a way the sort of, I guess, implementation of that. I think it's the same with, the switch hit and some of those audacious shots that we'll talk about, I think, with some of the other nominees. But if he didn't pioneer things like that switch hit against Styrus and Murali and others, he certainly perfected some of the unorthodoxy that now permeates that T20 game for me. From a test perspective, I mentioned it with Strauss, his match-winning 180 odd in India. It was a batting masterclass in Mumbai on a turning pitch. He was also a T20 World Cup winner for England as well. The bit that I think is the influence for him, because he did a lot of stupid stuff as well. I've got here, granted he was a dick at other times, but from a legacy perspective, I think in terms of the global game, the reason that the IPL is now so successful is that, with the exception of the elephant in the room, which is that Pakistan players don't play a part in that tournament, it truly is a global tournament, and it's carved a window out. And I think, but for him, England wouldn't have been part, or England players wouldn't have been part of that in the way that they are now, because his maverick nature, and he wanted to push boundaries and really strongly believed that those guys going and playing in that tournament would ultimately benefit English cricket. There was so much resistance to that, but he paved the way for Jos Buttler and Owen Morgan and Jofra Archer and Jason Roy and a bunch of others to go and get the franchise experience that has led, in the main, I believe, to England's white ball success.
So how did he do that? Can you explain that? Because I don't know. It's not a challenge. I don't know the answer.
Yeah, so, this was in the era where central contracts had been really, really successful in the early part of the 2000s for England. And that was that you got a really good amount of money. We're talking about these guys were millionaires. Now, not Virat Kohli, 270, billion follower millionaires. But they were very, very well paid. But they weren't necessarily, they were controlled completely by the ECB. And he was the one who pushed to get, released to go and play in the IPL.
Okay.
Yes, I think if you are being true on the basis that he was going to make some serious coin, but I think he was also doing it for the reason that he stated, which is, this is going to help me learn to play particularly in a part of the world that most countries are not successful at playing at, because it is so different to the majority of countries that you go and play international cricket. So he was the one that broke ranks and went and did that, and there was a lot of conjecture. It's strange now how he was asking for a window to go and play in the IPL as an English cricketer, and now every single country has got that window almost to go and play in that. He won't now go down as England's greatest batter in the 20th century, because I certainly think Joe Root has overtaken him there. But in my view, from an influence perspective, whether you like the bloke or not, he had a massive influence on not just the English game, but I think also on the way that franchise cricket's evolved as well. So there's my 90 seconds on KP.
His commentary as well
is awful. As bad as his waistcoats.
Good cricketer, though.
Very good.
Good cricketer. Okay, I'm going to go with Brendon McCullum as my second pick, and I think that's going to segue nicely over across to Stu. It's a hard one. Well, it's not hard. It is almost emotional for us Kiwis to talk about Brendon McCullum and the way that we sort of transformed our cricket. Brendon McCullum came in, and a lot of people had the view that he usurped Ross Taylor's leadership and took over that regime with Mike Hesson, little gremlin Mike Hesson. But
That was the chat at the time, though, wasn't it?
And I was at the forefront of that. I was really, really negative on how they'd taken over. But at the end of the day, I had to eat my hat, and I think it was the right thing to do. And it pushed New Zealand cricket in the direction that we have been going in up until this point, where we're now probably starting to regress a little bit. But anyway, his transformative leadership. So he came in at a time where we were probably, I'm going to use the word lackluster, average, below average.
We're just kind of going nowhere, weren't we?
And really gave us direction, gave us a competitive sort of edge. We as New Zealanders, we as cricketers tend to not be hyper aggressive people. We tend to, draw first if you're looking to play Test cricket, but that's definitely not Brendon McCullum's approach. A hyper aggressive approach to cricket, positive aggressive approach to cricket has had a massive impact not only on New Zealand cricket but in the world cricket, and we're seeing that even go now into the Test game. The cultural shift that we had here in New Zealand, that it had me believing that in 2019 we were going to go to Australia and absolutely dominate them in Australia, and the only one who sort of turned up was Neil Wagner, who couldn't get a game after that, pretty much. But having that mindset, being able to sort of fight fire with fire, to go to Australia and make us believe that we could do it. The first wicket we took on MCG, at the MCG on Boxing Day, just everybody went mental, and it was all sort of a culmination of where we were going to with cricket and him as a player. So we've talked a lot about him as a sort of cultural phenomenon for New Zealand cricket, for cricket in general. As a player, he pioneered a lot of what we do in 2020 cricket these days, these little scoops he was doing off Sean Tate. I believe it was the old Jade Stadium, wasn't it? That's where we first saw it. And then he was the opening game of the IPL. This big stage. Here comes Brendon McCullum, and he got his 158 not out in that very first game at the IPL. He's completely, with others that we've talked about today, completely reshaped what cricket looks like. If you think back to the 92 World Cup, not even the 96 World Cup, where it started probably with the Sri Lankan openers, it's a completely different game now, almost unrecognizable, apart from the fact they've got balls and bats.
And look, and you haven't even mentioned that he's part of the cricketing lexicon now, Bazball. Like that. We sort of make fun of that sometimes, but it's not all Brendon McCullum, and I think all the stuff that you mentioned is not all Brendon McCullum, but he has played a massive role in the way that cricket has developed here in New Zealand. I think your great points around the belief, because I think that was the number one thing that I think he sort of instilled in that team. He was able to get to that side where they thought that they could go anywhere and they could compete with anyone at any time. And we could, obviously in the major tournaments, we'd always done well. He was the one that was at the leadership helm when we got over that line and got to that final. That led to the 2019 final. It led to the T20 World Cup final. It led to all of these things that Kane was able to then build on, which I think he deserves some credit for as well. But I do think McCullum deserves to be on the top of that pile. And the way he's been able to influence England cricket now coming in. I mean, again, whether you like it or not, he's come in there and he's taken that Test side from the bottom, the bottom of the rankings, one of their rock bottom times when we were all here like they just can't beat anyone.
So one series win in 3 years, yeah.
Well, but he's changed. He's changed how people view Test cricket over there, and he's changed how, again, they go over there. They think that they can win every series. They go into the situation where they're now building for this Ashes, thinking that they can win it. They were very, very strong competitors in this current Ashes.
Yeah,
he's changing the game, whether you think it's for the better or not.
Look, he's on my list, so I don't disagree. I think Ben Stokes has got a little bit to do with that England renaissance as well. So, yes, he might be the enabler. He might get the right Spotify playlist on at Nets, but there's other people involved in that.
Totally.
But the way that he's done that, and he's done it as a player, and now he's doing it as a coach, absolutely, 100% agree that he's a hell of an influential bloke.
Can I just throw one thing out there? I don't mean for this to sound flippant, and I don't want to make light of this, but whenever I think about McCullum's kind of, not quite laissez-faire attitude to cricket, but definitely his, like, this is only a game, let's go out and have fun, let's treat it for the thing that it is. I wonder actually how much Philip Hughes's death, how much impact that had on him, because he was captain of New Zealand in the UAE playing against Pakistan when that went down. He scored, and I had to look at the scorecard, so this is not off memory, but I vividly remember him going out, opening the batting and scoring a double 100. And New Zealand played that entire test match like it had zero meaning. And they went, actually, like, this is just a game to us now. There's far more important things going on in the world than this. I wonder if, and we will never know unless we actually talk to Brendon, probably off the record, as to what impact that incident in his life had on him. But I wonder whether or not that could have been a seminal moment in the development of this idea that baseball is this thing that can be enjoyed and loved, and whether or not he was... It took a confluence of people coming together. It took Stokes, it took the management of that England side, it took McCullum himself coming together to formulate, this is how we can play cricket, and executing that and taking that to the next level. But I just wonder if that test match in Pakistan, when New Zealand made millions and millions and millions of runs, was the kind of genesis moment of that line of thinking.
I know that I can't speak for Brendon, but I know that moment had a massive impact on that side, that they were really cut up by what had happened. And, obviously you're going to be cut up by that situation, but it seemed like that moment sort of impacted them maybe more than I thought it would at the time, and actually cricket around the world probably as well. But yeah, I mean, you're spot on. When, I think they didn't know if they were going to play. They certainly didn't want to play, I don't think. But it was decided that it was going to go on. They didn't bowl a bouncer for the whole, for the whole rest of the test.
Didn't celebrate
wickets, and they just went out and tried to smash it with the bat and ended up winning quite comfortably in the end.
Yeah, I absolutely think that clearly it was a seminal moment. I think it builds a little bit for me on that switch as well from a player power perspective as well. I think that approach, and we talked about it a little bit with Pietersen, a little bit with some of the guys that have gone and played T20. I think that probably just made the players also go, do you know what? We should be in charge of this. We are the product. We want this to be enjoyable, and we're going to do it on our terms. And I think that's definitely what you've seen with him in the England dressing room. So yeah, look, I think that moment, is one that when you kind of pinpoint the significance of that from a cricketing perspective, absolutely, I think as a catalyst for a lot of the stuff we might talk about tonight.
And I guess on that point, I'm going to throw a couple of names out here just because I think we're probably almost at the point where...
Is that how it works? You get...
Well, no, it comes around, so it is two for me.
It is two for you.
But
okay.
I think
I only had one, but sure.
We're at the point... We're at the point where, time is ticking away. So
what we're going to do is we are going to get to about halfway, and we're going to do this in 2 episodes, and we're going to have a break, a quick lie down, and then we'll come back and do the second half.
Okay. Well, look. So first person I'm going to throw out is Lasith Malinga, and the thing that I think, obviously now we see Thushara, we see Patirana, we see in Sri Lanka there are bowlers who pretty much look like him now. They remind us of him when they run in. But I think the thing that he did is he kind of made it cool to be different. It was, I think, even when you're growing up playing cricket, you're told to do things in a certain way, and Malinga came along and just blew that out of the water. I know there were other bowlers that were different for many, many years, but I think he's the number one in my head that stands out as, he was just so different, and it meant that people were coaching differently. I think that people have, if someone runs in and they have a weird action now, I think you look to someone like Jasprit Bumrah now. I think that maybe it's a stretch to draw a direct line from Malinga to Bumrah, but I think that there's some of those elements there where you go, okay, well, he's a bit different or she's a bit different. We don't have to coach that out of them. If they're good at what they're doing, they can run in and actually do that. And we saw even we want to put it on the skill sense, the way that he was able to bowl at the death, those Yorkers, and the Yorkers, the like searing Yorkers combined with the slower balls. You look at any qualities death bowler at the moment, that is exactly what they're trying to do. So yeah.
In terms of mastering a skill set, we talked about Jimmy Anderson earlier. He is absolutely in that mold of mastering the skill set of low release point, death bowling, nailing that Yorker, all of those kinds of things. I think it's really interesting that you raised Malinga, because we have seen bowlers with different actions throughout the eras, right? Tate, Waka had a bit of an interesting action. Jeff Thompson also famously very interesting action. Even guys like Max Walker, Tangles had a very different action. There are lots and lots of cricketers. But in the era of biomechanics being a real scientific study of how you bowl fast and accurately and how you preserve your body, that was a real push. And we might even talk about some of the people behind that push. He was very much against the mold. So he didn't come along in an era of lots of different actions. We knew a lot of science at that time, right? We knew what it was to get the most out of levers and muscle groups and all that kind of stuff. So we started to create a science out of bowling fast, but he broke that mold completely. And I think, if it weren't for him, I feel like you're right. Guys like Jasprit Bumrah would have had their actions coached out of them. But we know now that different biomechanics can be successful in cricket. And I might be drawing a bit of a long bow in terms of, Bumrah would have that action coached out of him. But I think that there was a growing momentum in terms of biomechanics and that kind of cookie cutter approach to how you create a fast bowler. He broke all of that.
You're right. His action was just not cricket. That's where it would have been, and would have been coached out. And he made umpires change to coloured clothing as well because of where the ball was coming out of as well. No, very good. And your good point you make about the slow ball bouncers. I think he was one of the first proponents of that.
Is the Chad Bradford of cricket?
Moneyball. Moneyball chat. It's good.
Yeah. Good reference. The other person I'll throw out there is Rashid Khan, and obviously we haven't talked about spin, and I think the name that people will be thinking is, well, why haven't you talked about Warne? And that's, I think, because we're saying his influence on the game started before 2000, and so that's why he's not there. That's probably why Murali's not there, even though, you know, we were saying off air, arguing off air whether Murali's been as impactful, but you know, that's for a different conversation. But Rashid Khan, I think there's two reasons. One is that simply the way he bowls. We talked about Shane Warne just now. You see a lot more bowlers now that bowl like Rashid Khan, leg spinners, that try and run in and do what he does, than you do Shane Warne. And so, you know, if we're talking, let's model ourselves on someone. Rashid Khan's success in T20 cricket, I think, he's the second all-time, I think, bowler at the moment of T20 wickets. He bowls leg spin that's, you could say, is, you know, trying to restrict rather than to attack, even though I think that probably does undersell the variety and the skill that he does have and ability to kind of do that. But again, there are a lot more people that are trying to bowl his way. I also think that what he was able to do by being, at the time, an associate cricketer and coming in and going around being a player who was selected as an associate cricketer to play in the IPL, to play in franchise leagues all around the world, I think it had a push to sort of move Afghanistan cricket through a bit faster, because they had this, you know, genuine superstar to actually, you know, build around and market around, and ICC to say, oh, we want this guy playing Test cricket and at these World Cups. So I think that's really important. And the way it's meant that all of the leagues around the world have opened up, and they're now not just looking at, you know, the Test playing nations. Afghanistan obviously now one of them, but they are looking everywhere around the world to try and find the best talent. So yeah, I think Rashid's had a big impact on the game.
And in his own country.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've talked about Afghanistan now a Test-playing nation, but able to take on any team in the world in white ball cricket on any given day.
You're next, I think.
Are we going, Baldy?
I only had one because I'm not counting.
You can go, Baldy.
I'm going to have one more person, because we've covered off a couple of different categories, and we might come to the categorization in the wrap up in the second half. But before we do, I'd just like to throw one more cricketer out there. This is a person who has done many things very, very well, but I just want to throw this first at you. Debuted for Australia at 16, became the youngest international cricketer, the only person ever in the history of the world to play in an ICC World Cup and a FIFA World Cup. Averages 60 with the bat in Test cricket. Averages 50.
I don't know that that's true.
What?
Oh, maybe. You carry on. We've had Rebecca Rolls is certainly, she might have been the Olympics, maybe not a FIFA.
First
anyway,
cricketer.
You carry on. I won't interrupt you.
Yeah. First to have appeared in the ICC and FIFA World Cup. Others may have done it since. She did it first. Right. Of course, I'm talking about Ellyse Perry, right? Okay, so this is not just about her ability with the bat. Averages 60 with the bat, averages 25 with the ball, arguably the greatest all-round cricketer ever. I said all-round in there before anyone gets too upset. But what I want to talk about is her influence on women's cricket, not just in Australia, but across the globe. The development of women's cricket, or women's sport in general, in the 21st century is one of the big pluses of our lifetime, right? We've started to break down some of the barriers, some of the gaps between sport for men and women in the last 25 years. In my mind, the most important figure in women's cricket for breaking down those barriers and creating a role model for young women and men to look up to want to play cricket is Ellyse Perry. And she transcends nationalities. She's one of the very few women, I think, that transcends gender in terms of being a role model as a sports person, not just because she's a great cricketer, but she also played soccer and she also did a lot of things as well. So for me, in terms of bringing new markets for cricket, we've talked about a lot of players who are able to do that both nationally and internationally. I just want to make sure that Ellyse Perry is on the list for consideration for this Rushmore for that reason.
I remember when we've been doing the 100 Test cricketers list, and you kind of throwing Ellyse Perry's stats out there when we talked about the all-rounders, and the plus minus was a big one that we had. I can't even remember what it was, but I remember that Ellyse Perry's is just absolutely bananas.
It's plus 40.
Yeah.
For listeners. So she averages 61 with the bat and 21 with the ball. It's phenomenal. And no one comes close. I mean, it's small sample size, sure, all that stuff, but yeah, statistically huge.
Is it back to me?
It's back to you, but yeah, what are we doing? We're about, what are we, 45 minutes in, 40 minutes in?
We can maybe throw 2 or 3 more names in the hat, and then we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back and we'll somehow try and get this chiseled onto Rushmore in the second half of the show.
All mine have been covered, so over to you two.
Yeah. I just want to throw, and it pains me to do this, to be perfectly honest, I'm going to have to throw an Australian in there. And that's Adam Gilchrist. And I've said this a lot of times. I think there's probably an overestimation of his impact on that great Australian side in his ability to balance it, because I actually think Shane Warne had a massive amount of impact on being able to balance that side when they went in with 3 seamers, a spinner, and a keeper who could really bat probably 6 or 5 in that lineup if you'd have needed to, because Warne was able to bowl those overs on the first day that normally your 4th seam might have had to do. But he absolutely broke the mould, if you think about it, from particularly the impact of a wicket keeper on Test cricket. He made it no longer acceptable to bat below number 7. He certainly made it no longer acceptable to average any less than 35 with the bat in Test cricket. And I think probably to his credit, he was also a damn good wicketkeeper. Certainly by the end or the middle to the end of his career, he kept to Warne pretty well. I'm not going to say he kept to him quite as well as Ian Healy, but he wasn't far away. And certainly to the quicks, I think he was absolutely brilliant, particularly for a guy that was 6'2" or thereabouts, stood back. And he's now really the one that we always talk about when we are having that conversation about wicketkeeper batsmen, whether it's McCullum, whether it's Folkes, whether it's Bairstow, whether it's Jamie Smith, whether it's Kumar Sangakkara. He was the guy that probably made that real shift in the way that a Test cricket side had to operate. So, yeah, unfortunately, I've got an Aussie on my list of influential cricketers.
And it's not just Test cricket. I mean, it's
yeah.
I think you look to that and go, okay, well, I mean, that you've got batters that can wicket keep like that. It means that in those white ball formats, it's become even more so that they have to bat. If you would prefer, it seems, at least in T20 cricket, that they bat rather than be able to keep, in terms of where those priorities sit. So, yeah.
Yep. Certainly changed the discipline, really, didn't he? I think, tremendously for the better, particularly in terms of that approach to one-day international cricket and having your wicketkeeper open the batting for you or bat in the top 3. Just while I have the mic, and I'll give it up in a sec.
Can I just say one thing on Adam Gilchrist?
You can.
I'm trying to bring it up, but it's not coming up for me. But his average is actually light years ahead of any other keeper in sort of world cricket who has played for a decent amount of time. And I'm looking just here at Australians. Tim Payne is at 36, and he's the 2nd highest average, and Gilchrist at 47. It's incredible. He was 100%. It was not acceptable to have a specialist keeper who couldn't bat anymore once he was in the Australian side and established.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Can I just throw out one honourable mention before we move off? I'll give you the back microphone to wrap up this half of the pod with the rest of the guys. I just wanted to throw Tilakratne Dilshan out there, not just because he's one of my favourite players, but if we talk about pioneering disciplines of the game, I think his ability to access behind the wicket with the ramp and the Dill scoop, again, not the first person to do this. I went into a scoop deep dive, and there's a guy called, and his name escapes me. His name is Sammy Carter. He played in 1907 to 1921 for Australia. Wicketkeeper batter, pioneered 2 things: the use of the flick shot over fine leg to access the back half of the field. So his full name is Hanson Carter, born in Halifax in Yorkshire, played for Australia for about 14 years. Wicketkeeper bat. Also,
what was his crime?
Not sure. Not sure. Can't.
He got from Yorkshire to Australia.
Yeah, he did. But in the 20th century, so let's just not get too carried away, Adam. But you'll like this. He also pioneered the crouch rather than just sort of bending at the hips as a wicketkeeper. So Australian wicketkeepers famously.
So I've got my hips to thank for him.
Yep. So everyone who's got bad hips as a wicketkeeper can blame Hansen, Sammy Carter. That was my deep dive of the week. But getting back to Dilshan, I think his ability to pioneer the modern use of the ramp and the scoop, paved the way for basically the 360 batter we have now.
Right, purely for continuity issues now, is there anyone that we want to throw into the mix that makes it into the second half of the pod?
The only other honourable mention I have really was Graham Smith, and largely sort of similar reasons that you talked about with Strauss.
Yep.
And maybe his one is as yet to be decided because of his administration is so early in his tenure, and he's kind of, the big call he made obviously is the SAT20, and the giving prominence to that. We will see if that was a good call for South African cricket or not. Probably a bit early to tell, but yeah. For similar reasons, very, very good cricketer, had a huge impact on bringing them and making them an amazing side to play everywhere around the world, and now has gone into administration.
Awesome. Well, we are going to wrap up this half of the podcast. We're going to be back in part 2 to actually somehow chisel these into something that is anything like a Mount Rushmore of the most influential cricketers. And please do look out in your feed the following week, because we will have the 19th century most influential cricketers. Sammy Carter obviously will be top billing for one of those roles. But for the first half of our top most influential cricketers of the 21st century, that is a wrap from us here in Auckland. And we'll see you soon on episode 2.